Now we're going to talk about the writing process. Earlier we talked about the completed film, and now I'm going to tell you how to be producers and get somebody to write a script and then film and then edit the film for you. Okay, of course, here you do it all alone. And this is similar to other prescriptions for the writing process, but there are some things that I can say more specifically about writing about literature rather than talking generally about how to write. So some of the stages are going to be unique for writing about literature, but they'll correspond to stages you might know from other ways of writing. So first of all, you read the text, then you think up ideas, then you do close reading as a way of finding evidence. Then you write the first version of your paragraph and then you revise it and finalize it, making it more clear and readable. I cannot emphasize this more. The first thing you have to do when you get a question about the text is to read it. Now, if you just read it, you can skip this stage, but you have to read the text even before you start thinking, even before you start thinking about what you want to say about it. Read it all the way through. Know the text as well as you can. Okay, even not necessarily thinking in terms of close reading, just having an acquaintance with the text. So usually for class assignments, you just read it and we read it together. So we're doing that stage. The next stage is to think up ideas. Knowing the story, right? Don't think about ideas about the story without knowing it. Writing about literature means about a specific text. So with the text in mind, think about ideas and what it is you want to argue. And the general advice for this stage is try not to be overly critical of yourself. Try to throw out ideas, even bad ones. Then after you have a number of ideas, you can choose the best one. What is important is not just to go with the first idea that you have. If you have anything like more than an hour, give your brain time to go over the question. Come up with at least 2-3 possibilities, and then choose the one that's going to give you the strongest paragraph, the strongest argument. Okay, you don't necessarily have to formulate it the best way right now, but have a number of options, even if some of them are bad ones. How do you do that? No, you can just give your mind time to think by doing the dishes, taking a shower, going on a walk without checking your phone all the time. You can sit down with a piece of paper and jot down ideas. There's this technique of free writing where you have to write straight through for 2-3 minutes, thinking about the question. Whatever comes into your mind, you write it down without any criticism of yourself, without any self-censorship. Just write it down, and then ideas are going to come up, and some silly things are going to come up as well. But by the end of that writing process, you're going to, you made your brain work, right? It's difficult to come up with ideas because the brain thinks about a million different things. And a lot of time that thing is, I wonder what's happening on Facebook. I wonder what's for dinner. And when you concentrate for 2 minutes on writing or on putting down ideas or on doing something that does not allow you to think about other things, and then ideas come up. And of course, you can talk with friends, not necessarily people who are in the same class or know the story. Find somebody who lives with you and tell them, we read this story. I have to answer this question. And by talking and explaining to somebody who actually didn't read the story, you might come up with a good idea. And by the end of the process, if this is going to be a book you're writing, this brainstorming process can take weeks, months. If this is one paragraph, this should take 15 minutes tops, or a little more if you're taking a walk. But by the end of this, you should have a list of a number of possible arguments, and then you can pick the best one, the one that is most interesting, that is most rich, the one that's interesting for you. 5 minutes to brainstorm an idea. Use one of these techniques, do some dishes. So by the end of the process, you should have a list of ideas that answer the question, what is the significance of the yellow wallpaper in the story? Welcome back. Now we have a list of possibilities. How do you choose? How do you choose the best thesis or argument for your paragraph? It's going to be more productive. Okay, so some of this is going to be personal, what your opinion is, or what kind of argument you prefer to make. But I can give you some general guidelines. You don't want the thesis to be too general or vague. You want it to say something specific, and it should be about the text. Women are oppressed by modern society is not such a good thesis for this paragraph, because you want to talk about the story. That thesis doesn't talk about the story. It talks about society in general. Even first-person narrators are often unreliable. That's also not the best thesis for this kind of writing, because you want to be more specific. This narrator is unreliable. Okay, again, not something that you could say about any text. You want there to be specificity. You want there to be something unique about this text that you're bringing forward. On the other hand, you want it to be something that you can prove, that you think you should be able to find evidence for. So if it's something that is too out there, too idiosyncratic, too personal to you, too much of a personal association. For instance, somebody raised the idea of the egg being connected to the Easter egg. Okay, maybe you can prove it, but I'm not sure. So you have to ask yourself, is this something that's just my sort of general association, or is this relevant to the story, and is this something I will be able to convince somebody else to believe as well? And finally, it does need to be an argument that needs to be proven. So on the one hand, you want it to be something you can prove. On the other hand, you want it to be something you need to prove. If it's something that's obvious and nobody would ever argue against that point, nobody could possibly bring any other option. For instance, the narrator of the yellow wallpaper is a woman. That's a bad thesis for the paragraph, because probably nobody would ever argue with that point. There's just too much evidence for it. So you want something that's not automatically obvious. You want something that you'll need to prove to me, to prove to your reader. Now, this is one of the challenges, and I try to give you questions where there is more than one possible answer, so you can come up with a thesis that does need proving, that is not obvious, right? I'm not asking you what is the gender of the narrator in the yellow wallpaper. I'm not asking you, I don't know, where does the sacrificial egg take place? It says so. You don't need a whole paragraph in order to discuss this question. I'll show you a list of possible theses for the question about the wallpaper, and maybe you want to pause the video and look at them and think which of them, there is more than one, which of them has potential for a whole paragraph that's not trivial, not obvious, but could be proved. So let's go through them. The wallpaper is the symbol of madness. Okay, this has potential. It stands for her madness. We can find evidence for it, but it's not automatically, right? It's not automatic. We have to make these connections. Wallpapers are not obviously connected to madness. Even in the story, we have to explain how exactly. So you have a space to develop it. The wallpaper really is the cause of the madness. This you really will need to prove it, right? Because the natural thing for us to do is to assume that she loses her mind for her own personal psychological reasons, and because she stands and because she is made to stay at home all the time. So if you want to think about the wallpaper as the cause of madness, you'll have to make an argument. I'm not sure you could, because there are different reasons that make a lot more sense for her madness. The wallpaper represents control over women. Okay. Again, not obvious. Why would the wallpaper be control over women? So we can develop it, and you saw me developing it earlier. The wallpaper gives her ideas about how to take control over her life. Okay, this is interesting. It's actually the opposite of the thesis I developed, but I think you could find evidence for that, right? Because the women escape, at the end of the story, the women escape the pattern and crawl outside of the wallpaper. So maybe there's something liberating about looking at the wallpaper, but you'll have to develop it. And it's actually the opposite argument from what I said before, that it represents the control over women. You could combine these arguments, but you see that you could have an argument. No, this is about controlling women. No, this is about liberating women. You could actually have, no, I use the word argument as something that one person writes, but an argument is also two people speaking with each other. So this could be an argument in that sense. The wallpaper changes its meaning throughout the story. Okay, yeah, that's probably true, but it's very vague, right? You're not saying something about what its meaning is. You're saying something about how it functions. So if you want to develop this into a thesis, you have to say, yes, in the beginning it represents this, in the middle it represents this, in the ending it represents something different. So you'll probably need a longer essay, and just saying it changes its meaning, that's too vague, too general. The wallpaper is just a decoration. First, it's a little boring, just saying doesn't mean anything. That's not a very good way to start your paragraph. And also, it's probably not true about this specific story. The wallpaper represents the narrator's love for her children. Okay, if you could prove that, it would be super interesting. But I'm not sure that the story has any evidence to support the connection between love and the wallpaper, or maternal love and the wallpaper. If you could find evidence for that, it would be a super good paragraph, because it shows something that's not obvious at all. So you have to find a kind of middle ground between something that is too straightforward and something that is so out there that you're not going to be able to prove it from the story, because You want your thesis to make sense, to be convincing as well, not just surprising, but also convincing. Judging what the best argument or thesis is for you is a skill you develop over many assignments, months, and years writing about literature. But the point is that if you don't have the general argument, the rest of the process will not work out very well. It's the foundation of the rest of the project, of the rest of the next stage.